We've got Garrett Woods, CEO of GetScale. We've got Tim Noonan. Oh, wow, cheering section, the front row. We got Tim Noonan, SVP of Operations, Innovation, and Services at Sweetgreen. Sweetgreen, the automated salad chain. I say, where's the make line? We should have brought that in and put it up here and run that one. We've got MJ Chun, co-founder and VP of Product at Serve Robotics, the delightfully anthropomorphic Serve. Anand Gopalan, who's the CEO and co-founder of Vayu Robotics. Brad Templeton, publisher of Robocars.com and the chairman emeritus of the Electronic Frontier Foundation, and our moderator, Alex Heath, deputy editor of course, The Verge. Alex, it's all yours.
All right, happy hour approaches. This is unhappy hour. All right, thanks for being here, everyone. We've got people in different areas of this topic, so I thought, we just had everyone's names said, but I thought it'd be helpful actually for everyone to maybe get a quick rundown of how everyone's work intersects with this topic. So maybe we can start with you and then work our way around. What do you do? What does your company do? And we'll go from there.
Awesome. Is this on? All right. MJ Chun. I am co-founder. I do product and design for Serve Robotics. We do sidewalk delivery robots, purpose-built, mostly in dense urban areas. And we believe in slow autonomy, where we are very comfortable with being in public and sidewalks and sidewalk adjacent.
I'm Tim Noonan. I work at Sweetgreen, which you may know primarily for our restaurant concepts. We now have automated concepts that we've been launching in the past 3 years. We've got about 12 of them live today, where all of our bowls and salads are assembled through automation.
You also have French fries, which I want to hear more about.
Ripple fries. They're very good.
Yeah.
Are they out there?
They are not out there.
My name is Garrett Wood. I am the CEO of GetScale. We recruit about 100,000 new workers each year, primarily for the gig economy. We have about 500,000 conversations with prospective workers each month. So hoping to relay their questions, concerns about the automations that are coming, the roles, and the industry in general.
I'm Brad Templeton. I write and been writing about self-driving technology now for almost 20 years on Robocars.com, my site, and also on the Forbes website. I've also advised and assisted in many companies. I was on the early Waymo team. I helped build Starship, which is a delivery robot company. I advised Zoox and Cruise when they were getting going. So I try and put my finger into everything and criticize it all.
Hi, my name is Anand Gopalan. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Vayu Robotics, and Vayu is the new kid on the block in delivery robots. We got started with this idea of building an autonomy system that costs less than $2,000, and so we have built that without LiDARs, even though I built and shipped LiDARs for 6 years in my previous life, and with an AI foundation model. And ultimately, we can build a system that can run with any sort of robot form factor, but our first robot carries 100 pounds of payload, drives at 20 miles per hour, and can be built for less than $5,000. We can talk more about it.
Yeah. Garrett, maybe we can start with you, since I think you're like the human gig economy piece of this panel.
I think that's exactly right.
Yeah.
For all the people that like humans,
yeah,
I'm the guy.
Yeah.
They're overrated.
Give us a temperature check of the gig economy right now. Like, what are you seeing at a high level? Where is it shifting? What's exciting? What's scary?
Yeah, it's a really interesting time. I think the major changes sort of over the last decade are the number of roles available to people. So 10 years ago, it was mostly you could do rideshare or you could do delivery. Now you can do shopping, you can walk pets, you can build IKEA furniture, you can be a substitute teacher. And then I think the other big change that is happening is just the level of competition to attract and retain people.
So you're not seeing the human need in this diminishing rapidly?
Not yet.
Because I think that's like in the media, that's the narrative, is that as all this autonomy and these robots get deployed and people can get their food in all kinds of different ways, it's already leading to unemployment. And in reality, you're saying it's the opposite.
Well, not yet. I think the big question, you can probably guess this, it's 80 degrees and I'm wearing a dress shirt, so I like history. When the power loom was invented in 1790 or something, the price of textiles plummeted, demand was very elastic, and the number of people working in the textile industry went up dramatically over the next 100 years. I was talking to someone who, I won't name the platform, but they just ordered 4 Chipotle bowls for their family. It was $120 to get them delivered. My sense is if automation and robots can make the delivery and creation of the food much more efficient and drive costs down, there's a lot of latent demand, and the number of workers in the space may actually increase. I think what we really know now, though, is that the roles will change. And I think that's really what everyone's sort of watching and trying to figure out.
And by the way, feel free to jump in. I want, if you guys have a reaction to that, I would love to hear it.
Well, one of my other hats was building a place called Singularity University, which is a futurist teaching place. And this question is one of the most common questions that come up. What happens as automation replaces human beings? And the history of that goes back centuries, as you said. We've got to trace a history of books describing, oh my God, robots are going to take all the machines are going to take all the jobs. And these books have come out regularly for the last 200 years, and they have always been wrong. It has never been the case that employment went down because of machines. Jobs certainly changed. 200 years ago, 98% of people worked in agriculture. 100 years ago, it was 50% of people worked in agriculture. Machines did replace all of that, and yet we're all doing more. One of my favorites is a letter that was some people got together and saw this big danger of machines taking jobs, and they said, we should write a letter to the president like Albert Einstein did in the 1930s about the danger of technology. So they wrote the letter to the president explaining all this. The letter began, Dear President Johnson. All right? So people have been saying this and worrying about it and been wrong every single time.
And so more concretely, also in the world of delivery, what you see is there's sort of 2 key points here. One is, as it was already said, today there are a lot of deliveries, a lot of things that you will not order on a delivery app just because, my favorite thing is a McDonald's order, right? I'm not going to pay double for my, my Happy Meal because it's going to show up on a delivery app. And if you're able to bring the cost of delivery down using automation, and our North Star at Vayu is $1 a delivery. What happens is you see incredible market expansion because now people will start going and getting things at their doorstep that previously were far too expensive to do. I think that's one key point. The other thing is, I think it's been said in multiple panels today that we think there's going to be a world which is multimodal, right? So there will be a world where humans work, in tandem with robotics to make things happen. So you're always going to have supervision for these robots, as an example, and there'll be jobs that involve robot supervision. There'll be, jobs that involve consolidation of orders, either at the point of delivery or at the point of loading the robot. So there's all sorts of places where humans will interact with robots. Yes, the jobs will change, but I don't see this world as being robot only or human only. I think robots are going to be a force multiplier.
And I think it's also not just the jobs change, but these are new jobs. They're completely new roles and verticals. We do deliveries in Los Angeles 365, we're in Dallas, we're in Miami. These robots, they need maintenance, they need mechanics, they need somebody to do simple things like clean them out sometimes or apply decals. These are highly tiered roles that never existed before, and these roles are in the communities that the robots are servicing. And I think it's really not just shifting the labor force, but also the proliferation of roles we never even thought would exist 10 years ago.
Yeah, Tim, what about for you at Sweetgreen? You guys have a lot of employees, and you're also doing robotics. And And also maybe talk about this infinite kitchens thing you guys are doing and how it intersects with all this.
Yeah, for sure. So at Sweetgreen, since I've worked there, which has been basically the whole time, we've been trying to figure out how we could continue to deliver on our promise of high quality food, but build more and more on this concept of convenience, which has evolved a lot over the past 16 years. And what that has done is it's put a ton of pressure on our workforce to be the most friendly and hospitable people, extremely accurate, very, very fast all at once, and it's created a job that's really very, very challenging. And so what we love about the Infinite Kitchen, which is the automated system that we use in our restaurants right now, again, not all of them, but some of them, is it takes away the pressure of speed and accuracy, putting that into the machine, and it allows our teams to focus on hospitality and the prep. So we still prep everything fresh in-house every day, but now you load it into one place versus splitting it on a digital make line and a front line, and you take away the pressure of making things really, really fast and accurate from the human, and allow the human just to finish and do a quality check and interact with customers, help them navigate the menu. So as we begin deploying this in more places, we've seen lower turnover in our teams, we've seen much happier team members from our internal satisfaction ratings. So it's been a win in our minds, and it allows us to open more locations, which creates more of the jobs that people actually want.
Because I think the tension people imagine is the humans see the robots next to them and they go, God, they're coming for me, and it creates this resentment. But you're saying in your all's data, you've actually seen the opposite.
Yeah, we've actually done, of the locations we have live right now, 3 of them have been retrofits. So we've taken existing locations in Chicago and New York and converted them, and the team members love them. They're all smiles. They can't say anything bad about them because they still are finishing. We're still putting avocado on by hand, fresh herbs, salmon, checking the bowls. We're just not having to race through 55 ingredients in 15 minutes on 100 bowls at a time. They now can focus and then actually want to engage with customers. So.
Yeah, I think that's a very thoughtful approach. I think pulling a few lessons from the infamous and now defunct Zoom Pizza, when they tried to automate everything, I think the time it took to create a pizza from start to finish, basically it was 75% slower than when it was just all people in the kitchen. And so I think looking for opportunities where 1 + 1 can equal 3 is really where this gets exciting, is able to not only, one, make it much more efficient and help companies and people grow and create new opportunities, but also can create roles that are better for the individuals working them. Another sort of interesting lesson from Zoom is they were paying their drivers $24 an hour, pretty good, and gave them equity in the company. Still, all of the drivers would leave and they'd go work with DoorDash, Uber Eats. They wanted more flexibility. So I think being really thoughtful about what do people like, what do they accelerate, what do they do really well, and then putting them in a position where they can focus on that is a very thoughtful and effective approach.
Thanks. Brad, in your writing and work and research and consulting you've done, do you think about the new kind of jobs that will get made as a result of this automation wave?
I mean, I do, and yet usually they're jobs that are not predicted. There's no one who thought prompt engineer was going to be a job category just a couple of years ago. It is a little bit facile to say that, like the movie Shakespeare in Love, it'll work out. It's a mystery. And yet it always has, and now some people say finally there'll be the day when it changes, but I usually see 2 types of reactions to new automation and that's able to replace workers. Some people look at it and say, oh my God, that machine does what I do. What does that mean for my career? What does that mean for me? And there's other people who say, shut up and take my money. Right? I want that as soon as I can get it. I don't want to do that stuff I used to do. I think we'll see that dichotomy for a long time. And we are going to definitely see it in driving. I know there's a few people who drive for Uber in here. I worked at Waymo. We are definitely trying to make that. What didn't come up in the Waymo panel this morning, although there was a lot of useful information there, is they didn't talk about the fact that, as you said, you want the deliveries to be $1. Humans are not doing it for $1. Waymo is today priced almost the same as Uber and Lyft. That is not the long-term plan. No dark secret being revealed there. The long-term plan is going to be significantly cheaper, and so it's not going to be too many people saying, I want a human to drive me to the airport to handle my bags if it's 3 times the money to do that. So if you think driving is the thing, but how many people view driving as a career? And I don't want to insult the people in this room, some of whom are, but most people don't see it as a career, and so I think the world will adapt to it.
The AI piece of this is fascinating to me, and it feels like there's a real unlock happening with transformer architectures and everything happening with machine learning as it relates to robotics. And you all are really at the forefront of that. Can you talk a little bit about why it seems like robotics and logistics is really starting to see this unlock with this wave of AI that we're seeing as well?
Yeah, sure. When we got started at Vayu, the question, I had customers in the autonomous vehicle world in my previous company. I was the CEO of a company called Velodyne. And basically, the autonomous vehicle of the day was, 50, 60 sensors and a server in the trunk of the car, right? And I would always have customers who would come to me and say, hey, my system works, but now I need to reduce cost by a factor of 20. How do I do that? And I'd be like, I don't know, maybe start with a clean sheet of paper. And so what has now become possible with the new wave of AI foundation models is actually that clean sheet of paper. We have really been able to build, because I think what AI foundation models are able to do now is really they're able to solve robotics problems in a more generalizable way that was really not possible without 100 engineers rewriting code and remapping a city and a bunch of data collection and so on. So we have been able to do away with those things, and we have built effectively the robot and the autonomy system that I talked about with 15 people for $15 million. And I think that's what has become unlocked today with sort of these new paradigms, and also what that means concretely for the robot itself is that you can actually build these robots for $5,000 completely, and they can be autonomous because the entire autonomy stack is running on a single piece of silicon. And so that's the sort of stuff that's become possible, and I think this is going to unlock, and it already is unlocking tremendous innovation and robots of all different types of form factors, which will coexist in this interesting multimodal world.
What's your all's biggest kind of customer success story so far?
Yeah, we had a customer who basically, our first product is a robot that is capable of, driving on like a human on a bicycle. And so we had a customer who came and said, okay, that's great, but I have this problem, which is this has to go deliver it at the customer's doorstep, and how are we going to solve that really complex unstructured problem? And basically, we were able to prove to them that this AI model is capable of not just driving on the street, but then can turn into a driveway and deal with a very unstructured driveway with trash cans and parked cars and kids' toys littered, and still find its way to the doorstep. And then the customer said, but how about I actually like these quadruped dogs. I don't really like these wheel systems. And we said, okay, that's fine. We can port the model over, and lo and behold, it works on a completely different robot form factor.
Wow. And for you guys, you've got these cute little robots, and I assume there's AI in there.
Absolutely.
But how does that work? How much of it is this generalized approach he's talking about versus how much do you have to map out ahead of time? Are you doing that at all even?
We actually do both. So we can do
both.
deliveries anywhere without being mapped. It's been one of our core philosophies from a tech perspective. The robot gets smarter and more reliable the more often it travels a particular sidewalk. So it learns as it goes. But our day one question to ourselves as a business was, how many deliveries have we done today? And if you require the overhead of HD mapping, that just slows you down. So we learn as we go, we do more as the robots get smarter. And I think the other piece that's really critical here is not only are we getting these incredible foundational models, compute on the edge has become much more powerful. And so you have orchestration in the cloud, you have onboard compute, you have these foundational models, you have these robots that can take unstructured, dynamic environments. And if you just think about a sidewalk in Los Angeles, there could be somebody hanging out, blocking the path. There could be a shopping bag. I mean, we had the robot pass someone walking their pet pig. Highly dynamic, right? These are unstructured environments, and it's
Dynamic is a good word for downtown Los Angeles.
And
Hanging out, I like that.
Maybe you're delivering pork.
Yeah.
And so I think this is the really exciting part from the tech perspective,
Yeah.
is what we're capable of doing, not just in Los Angeles, just internationally. Very different cities, very different. Each city has its own characteristics in terms of driving, how people cross the intersection, how they like to work, how they like to shop. And I think we're increasingly going to see robotics just embedded in the everyday.
What happens in the markets where you're into non-robotic delivery? How is what you're doing augmenting existing delivery logistics already?
It's absolutely multimodal. We don't ever expect to replace people in cars. My favorite use case that we're just like, you have a giant catering order, you're taking a beautiful birthday cake, shouldn't be going into Kamal, for example. And yet there are really cool use cases where, is this a restaurant in a strip mall that's really difficult to park at? How many cars can you double park before it becomes an issue for everyone else? The robots can go right up to the merchant's store. It can park at a specific place as requested by the merchant. And then from a customer standpoint, the robot will give them the same information, where it is in the world, when it's time to come outside and get it. That I think it really does help with that multimodal approach. But I had sprained my ankle. I couldn't go down my Victorian stairs in San Francisco. That's a time where I'm going to want someone to come up those stairs. So
Yeah.
It really is. We're adding options, and in doing those, in adding those options, really increasing what makes cities and commerce really incredible in cities.
I'm glad you're on the mend. Tim, I'd be really curious to hear, we've sort of skirted around this idea of the destruction, creation, and transformation of jobs. How do you think about like educating, explaining how to start working with robots? What's the why behind it? How do you think about doing that with your teammates?
Yeah, so when we acquired Spice in 2021, they had 2 operating locations in Boston, with a machine that was very similar to what we have today, with some modifications that we made. The biggest thing we did, though, was think about how you would do it at scale, how a human would interact with this device. They had 2 locations and a ton of engineers who were really hand-holding those operations themselves, and we knew that it had to be incredibly easy for any hourly team member to clean it, repair it, swap things out, keep it running. And we spent really like 2 years focused on those details, and I have to say it's the thing that I'm most proud of in the work, because we have no issues whatsoever with teams using the Infinite Kitchen. It's incredibly simple, it feels very intuitive to them. Teaching them to refill the automation is as simple as refilling the front line. It's something that they're very used to and familiar with. Prepping the product, it gets prepped into similar pans that they're familiar with and dumped into this system, very easy. The team created simple tools on a series of iPads that essentially helped them control the startup, the breakdown. So all of that was pretty straightforward. I mean, we haven't had formalized training really until now. My team's developing it now as we scale this to more and more locations. But we were dealing with essentially a couple, SOPs and a phone number if you have a question, and the teams really understood it. I think because we were so focused from a design perspective on how it had to work at hundreds of locations, that really helped us make it easy for the team members that we hired to interact with it.
Just to piggyback on that, I do agree, as much as we talk about AI as being a key enabler, I do think any robotics company today has to spend a lot of time thinking about human interaction and human interface design. And that's true for delivery robots as well. I mean, because delivery robots interact with humans in many different situations, and so I do think that as much as and AI can help as well, because now AI can make you be able to talk to the robot and it understands you and so on. But I do think robot and human interaction and human interface design is a huge part of modern day robotics. And I think it's going to become even more important as the AI stuff becomes quote unquote easier.
One of the most promising areas of AI application is education. Right, and so we're just beginning to see this, but the ability to build very interactive, customized training for people for whatever new work is going to go on, and that wasn't planned as part of this, but it seems to pull off. On the robots and delivery, there's a couple of interesting things. I always look for things that the robots can do that humans can't do or that won't do. Now, when it comes to restaurants, robots don't go into the restaurant to pick up the order, which some restaurants do not like. But they will arrive before the order's ready and just sit there because they don't mind waiting the way the human beings. Human drivers do not want to come to a restaurant and sit for 10 minutes waiting for the order to come out. And a robot has just no problem with it, so it's going to get the order the moment it's freshly cooked, which can actually be better for the customer as well.
I think that's a really interesting note because we say things like automation creates jobs, but it does require a transition. Long-haul truck driving is sort of famously a rough job. I think it's got the highest rate of disability, second highest rate of divorce, and I think seventh highest rate of fatality. Like, it's a tough job.
And turnover is over 100% in many years.
Yeah, and if we waved a wand and got rid of all of those jobs, automated them overnight, those people are probably in a worse position. And so I think it's important to be cognizant for companies that are transitioning roles and transitioning the needs of their workforce to think about what's the right role for the right people. Gig workers sort of famously care about pay, how much money can I make, flexibility, can I set my own schedule, and then what's the environment or what's the job that I'm doing. But pay can look very different to different people. Do they care about maximizing total cash comp? Do they care about stability and benefits? Do they like people? Do they like just being able to put in a podcast? I think being very cognizant about providing a how to be successful as roles transition, but also giving some visibility into why are we doing this can help ensure that the big organizations who are making these transitions maintain trust, but also keep people motivated to continue to work with them.
Is this continuum we're on, like right now we're in the introducing humans to robots in the flow phase? Seems like inevitably it becomes coexisting, like where it's not really like how they're augmenting, but it's like how do we fully coexist with these machines? And then eventually I would think the third phase would be how do we help the robots do their jobs? Do we agree with that phased approach, or? And obviously we're on the early side of it, but I'd be curious to hear any reactions to that idea.
Well, some of us help the robots do their jobs, but a lot of people do just different things. They do tasks which are good tasks for humans and are rewarding, some of which don't exist today, some of which do exist, but they're not necessarily helping a robot. Other than when you say, I think most people will be using some sort of machine, not necessarily robot, in their work. It's pretty rare these days to not use a machine in your work.
I think from a sidewalk delivery perspective, the robots don't have any rights to be on the sidewalk, they have to be welcome. And then I think from a serve perspective, our largest user base is actually the public. More people will walk next to the robot, will drive through an intersection while the robot is crossing, than will ever get a burrito from that robot. And so back to that sort of human interaction perspective, the design, the behavior, the understanding of the world around it is absolutely critical for mass adoption. But if you said, n number of years from now, or wave that magic wand, if we're building smarter cities, it would be, you can imagine that we are including APIs with the traffic lights that can be inform robot behaviors, or AVs, that our sidewalks and our bike lanes also include different modalities in the actual city planning and how we think about the way people and goods move throughout the city. So my personal would love to see is robots improving how we build and plan our cities.
And interesting, you guys think about that in the way you design the robots.
Yes.
You want it to be friendly because that's how people are experiencing it around it.
We want to add value to the community, even if you're not getting a delivery from it. And then at the end of the day, the form factor, it's people. And so the robot is really built around ADA wheelchair footprint. We don't want to be too much wider than a person's shoulders, for example, because that's what that weird sidewalk chicken dance, you're like, oh, you go, all of that, all of those things inform the form factor.
I found it's bad to thank the people by saying, you are a good human, we will kill you last.
Yeah, eventually, yeah. But.
And I do think that that continuum that you described will always exist, right? I think there'll be certain types of robots that become good enough that they become almost seamless and you take them for granted, like your microwave, right? And there will be new types of robots which will again coexist and become quote unquote cobots. Someone coined that term, right? So there'll always be this combination of robots and cobots that exist in society, and humans will always need to find ways to interact and use them as tools. Because ultimately, I think we talk about robots as, being this independent entity, and I think of them more as being sort of this coexistent tool. And that's always going to be evolving and getting better and getting more transparent in certain domains and less transparent and requiring more human intervention in other domains.
Is there a future for Sweetgreen where robots do basically all of the work of preparing, like even prep and the avocado and the herbs, because the dexterity gets better, the models can perceive the world better, and humans become almost more like concierge, like the person at the front desk at the hotel, the way that the customers, feel the brand, but the robots are actually doing all of the work, maybe? Do you see that future?
Yeah, I think that there's a future where more and more goes through the automation. I'll say we intentionally refer to it as automation at Sweetgreen versus robots. It's because it feels a little less scary to our teams. There are things in assembly that I think we're working on today that will hopefully get more and more ingredients into the automated assembly. In terms of prep, there's absolutely, teams are already using tools in the back of house that help them cut things more efficiently. You could certainly involve robotics in that. I think for us, the biggest thing about our brand is that it's supposed to be a place that you feel like you're part of a community. And we want people to want to come into a Sweetgreen to spend time there. And if you go into an empty room with cool music, you don't really want to stay there by yourself. And so as we've been designing and learning about the form factor of this and how it fits into our restaurants, our next batch of restaurants are really intentional on opening up more and more components of the kitchen so you actually see more people. So if you do go in there at off hours by yourself, you still see 3 or 4 team members who are working the oven, who are prepping at cold prep, because that kind of gives you a sense of belonging whether or not you're talking. So I think that there'll always be a human component, but we do have a position that we call host that is intended to guide you through the menu, walk you through ordering, give you recommendations, and we're beginning to bring things like programming, specific tasting and sampling days into these formats so that people feel a sense of belonging and not just that they're part of an automated space.
Tim, that's really fascinating. I think a really interesting idea to sort of open up the kitchen, make it more human-centric. One question that I have is, as you've introduced more automation into the kitchen, have your hiring or recruiting practices changed at all to focus on people that maybe are more comfortable operating with technology than your sort of existing workforce?
I would say that, again, back to what I was saying before, we've designed it in a way that it's pretty simple to interact with. So it's more that the teams just need to be curious about technology versus experts with technology. If anything, actually, the way it's transformed the workforce is you have a smaller team, and you're actually, when you talk about in the restaurant space, cross-training and flex deployment, you're actually asking essentially every team member working, whether they're your hot prep to your cold prep, to be able to interact with customers and want to interact with customers. And so we need to be able to have your person who's been in there, prepping kale all morning, slide deploy to help someone navigate the menu, when previously you would have a larger workforce that might be separated with your service focused and you're not. So I think the requirement for all core team members now is becoming a little bit more you're extroverted and inclined to engage with guests.
We're getting towards time here. I'm curious if there's anything we can leave everyone here with in terms of what we're all excited about, the opportunities that we see, whether it's like a respective business or just generally. Is there anything that's like stuck out for folks in terms of how to think about this transition and introducing more automation and robotics into the gig economy?
We've helped a handful of companies who are introducing new roles as a result of automation or changing business lines recruit. And the sort of guiding principle that we always give them is to think about how similar is the role. Different people want different things. And like even Uber struggles to get their rideshare drivers to do Uber Eats and struggles to get their Eats drivers to do rideshare. So you have to be cognizant that like, we talk about like, oh, how's your driver supply? But when you zoom out to that macro level, you forget the fact that your workers are people and people are different. So you have to be cognizant of thinking about what is substantively the same about this role and what's different, and making sure that if it is substantively different, you maybe have to recruit a different demographic. If the benefits and the workflow are largely the same, you just need to be very cognizant about communicating how do you be successful. If people have bad experiences, they leave. And why should you go through this process of getting the education, getting the training, adjusting your workflows to accommodate us as a business?
Yeah, I think the topic of this discussion was man versus machine, and I really think of it as man enabled by machine. One of the examples I can give is, and you saw this in other countries where again in the context of moving goods, and the cost of moving goods became really low. You saw new businesses emerge and new types of businesses emerge, where like home bakers can basically get their products out to their customers without having to worry about how they're going to ship it. We're seeing that even in our markets, where we are seeing local grocers and local farmers want to partner with us to find ways to get their goods to their regular customers. So, we always think of this as like the delivery business as being like serving these behemoth large companies, but I do think that they can actually enable small business to be really successful. So, that's my the way I look at it is it's really man enabled by machine, and new types of businesses will emerge as this technology rolls out.
Any other thoughts?
Well, you asked us to be optimistic. I started optimistic by telling you that the history of this is that we always get through it. So now I'll be slightly more pessimistic and talk to you specifically about the ride-hail business, because that's very interesting to a lot of people here. I was at Waymo and helped them define their strategy, which was not to be Uber, right? Even though that's what they look like now. The strategy is to be a replacement for car ownership. Now, if you're an Uber driver, you do two things. You drive the car, but actually you provide the car, and that's as important in many ways to the job. And so if someone comes in and they replace car ownership, they are unfortunately a threat to that as a source of gig income. Now, as I said, the optimistic thing is other things are going to appear. Other ways are going to be there to make money with your own assets or with your time. But if you're counting on driving as a long-term career, I might advise a little bit of investigation in other places.
What about Swerve? How you guys think about working with humans, and what he was saying about small businesses too? I wonder if what you guys see there, and the big versus small business, and how they view the technology.
I think the thing that's really exciting about scaling and volume and really making delivery more accessible to everyone is that it does drive commerce at the hyper-local level. So you're getting to a point where the entire city is the warehouse. You don't have to ship something from very far away. I think even at the logistics level, you're seeing greater movement of goods closer to where people actually live. But with the multimodal logistics, whether it's food, whether it's a package, whether it's pharmacy, it's giving people the flexibility, and I think in many ways, I do believe that many of these robot form factors are going to become invisible. And even today, you can't really tell a Waymo apart from a car other than the extra sensors on top, right? So these are form factors that exist in our world. We actually took inspiration from shopping carts. So I think that that's the big piece is the transition will have spikes in who you are, what you want to do, how you want to spend your time earning the revenue you need. But in terms of how it unfolds, I don't think it's going to be a level of disruption that will shock anyone at all. This is a sort of ultimately it's the evolution of automation.
Well, I think we're getting close to time here, unless there's any more thoughts.
3 minutes? Anyone in the
Yeah,
audience?
we have 3 minutes, so if there's anyone who wants to ask any questions, we can do that.
Are you all stupefied? We'll pay you to ask a
Blow your
question.
minds.
What's the most complicated task you guys have seen a robot accomplish that just kind of blew your mind that maybe we haven't seen yet?
In terms of I'm sure you've seen the creepy videos from Boston Dynamics. Oh, you haven't? Oh, I mean, they've got robots dancing, running over rocks, doing all sorts of very rough terrain stuff. Obviously, you've seen what the LLM AIs are doing, writing entire applications and doing research. I had one of the AIs do a complete research music project for me. But there's 1,000 of those out there. One thing you will say about the large language models is they do continue to surprise us and impress us with their power, which is why companies like Tesla think that if they just pour enough data and enough compute on a problem that they will be able to drive. That's unproven as yet, but there are people who have faith in that.
I think in some ways, driving has been considered to be one of the more complex tasks, right? So obviously today we know that is on the verge of being solved, if not solved, right? So I think, but basically, if you want to extrapolate from that and look at what physical intelligences are able to do today, any mobility or manipulation task is capable of being solved or will be solved in the next 24 months by a physical intelligence model. I think what the limiting factor is actually, hardware and dexterity and touch sensors and things like that. But from a technical capability perspective, these systems will be able to solve mobility and manipulation. There's a lot more that humans actually do, and I think those are the things that we should focus on as important things for where humans will continue to add value, right? I don't think a robot's ever going to replace a human in terms of human-to-human interaction. But those are the things which I think are going to probably, in my opinion, stay unsolved. But anything in terms of physical movement and manipulation will be solved, I think, in 24 months.
Now that Kawasaki video everyone was forwarding this week, that is fake. People should know that. But it might not be fake in some number of years. In fact, the founder of Boston Dynamics always in his talks would show mountain goats to say, this is what I want to do someday. But he doesn't do it yet.
I guess we're at time. We have one more. Can we do one more?
Quick and pithy.
I'll try. So in the earlier days, when for the mobility robots for deliverables, how did you guys break through the market? Where did you see the first adoption? How did you kind of got into that ecosystem? What were some of the challenges? And are you scaling? Sorry, it wasn't short, but.
So just high level, we started as a startup within Postmates. So we were driven by the delivery data, looking at the cost of driver acquisition and the number of short distance deliveries. And we did the math. It made sense to have robots. So we started from a business problem of how do we increase delivery output, especially because people eat lunch around the same time. They eat dinner around the same time. we haven't really talked about it, but gig supply, I mean, it does ramp up, but you're still going to run into, hey, it's a 45-minute wait for a 20-minute job because they're doing something else. So that's how we started, and we started in Los Angeles. We started with a handful of robots. We're on Gen 3. We're about to roll out Gen 4. And so I think for us, it really has been based on delivery first.
At Starship, we just cheated. We put out the robot. We had human beings giving them a lot of guidance. They didn't like literally drive them, but the human beings got a lot of guidance. And then we increased the autonomy level until now almost all the deliveries need no human intervention. And so that was the path.
And we started in the exact opposite place from Serve and Starship. So we built a system that was faster, larger payloads, and significantly autonomous. And I said we were the new kids on the block, right? And so the approach we took was really to focus on suburban areas, right? So it's the kind of opposite, if you will, which is also an important market. But there you really don't have the luxury of a slow-moving vehicle because the distances between deliveries can be large. And so we started with that and then focused on customers who in those markets want to serve their customers in a 2.5, 3 mile radius. And so that's the approach we took.
All right, I think we're done. Thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Round of applause, please, for our panel.